What is up, Maniacs? I am Zach, and I am the Milly Maker Maniac. Welcome to our Week 6 DFS Recap. Unfortunately, we did not take down the Milly this week. We had a small loss this week. We were on a lot of things. Definitely learned. Made the biggest mistake was made a tight end. We'll jump into that as we get into it, but I went heavy on Warren, Ferguson, and Kraft, which isn't awful. They were all top 7. But what I needed to do was punt. I needed this Michael Mayer, this Harold Fannin, both guys that I saw like some potential in, especially Mayer at 3,100, like being a good play. Unlocking this 3,100, using 3,100 in the tight end spot would have opened up everything I needed to win the Milly with my player pool. I was right there with a few different lineups, but this was the missing piece this week, was not getting to Michael Mayer, which would have opened up my lineups. So we'll dig into that a little bit more, but let's just look at where we finished at each position. At quarterback, top quarterback was Drake May. He was one of our core plays from last week. Jacoby Brissett was very low owned. Let's see here. His ownership over here was just over 1%, 1.7%. So, yeah, very low ownership. We built a couple lineups with him. One of my biggest mistakes on the week, and I am pretty upset with myself on this one, is I built 2 Jacoby lineups, and they were both double stacks with McBride and with Harrison. I should have built a single stack with each of them. That would have unlocked a potential $1 million lineup. I don't know why I didn't, honestly. That was just bad process. I should have had a Jacoby and McBride lineup that just easiest stack, because it's going to be those 2 guys. It's either Harrison or McBride. There's really nobody else. So should have built one double and then 2 singles, but I built 2 doubles, and that prevented me from being able to access what I needed to at receiver. Obviously, Harrison, I think he got injured and did not have a good game. He's nowhere to be seen on this leaderboard at receiver. So sad that I missed that one. Obviously surprising that Brissett came in. To me, that kind of says a lot more about Kyler Murray than anything. I feel like this offense is kind of unlocked with Brissett rather than Murray, because they can throw the ball across the middle a little bit better. But yeah, is what it is. That's the one we missed. Obviously, a big surprise on the week. Would have never been a core play for us, but should have had a Jacoby and McBride lineup or 2. Unfortunately, the 2 that I did have both had Harrison in it, so that was a miss on the week. Daniel Jones was solid, another one of our core plays. It was pretty much impossible to build a $1 million lineup with Jones, though, at his salary and the guys that went off for him. So the best stack was with Warren. One that made sense I had a little bit of was Warren and Downs. I was pretty heavy on Pittman this week, but he missed pretty hard. But the best lineup I was able to build when I was trying to build like after the fact lineups with Daniel Jones to see like, could you have built one that made sense with my player pool to get to $1 million? I got up to 215 points, but the hard part was there's just nowhere to punt if you're not doing it at tight end. Even with Downs at 4,300, like there was no defense that I could get to that made sense. What killed me this week is I was 100% on the Browns. I went 100% defense of the Browns. Obviously, that's a 0 spot, so that killed me. Even getting to the Titans, I would have had 7 more lineups in the Milly Maker cash. I had 55 lineups cash out of 150 in the Milly Maker this week, so like I was on it, but this would have added another 7 lineups if I would have just gone Titans over the Browns. But really what I should have done, what I missed, was by not going punt at the tight end, I didn't allow myself to get to any of these defenses. Like I love the Rams and I love the Steelers. Those were 2 that I would have clicked a ton, but I just couldn't get to them in my builds because I was building with Warren, Ferguson, and Kraft, those 3. And they just weren't enough of a salary discount to get the guys that I needed at receiver and running back with Jones in there in order to get a Milly Maker lineup. But if I would have just thrown Meyer into my player pool with each of my core quarterbacks, had one lineup with Meyer in it, that I could have got to the build I needed to win. Yeah, I mean, when we look at our player pool from last week and we at quarterback, our heaviest one was on Herbert. Like I went heaviest on Herbert. Obviously missed there, but Dak, Drake, Daniel Jones, Sam Darnold, Bryce Young, those were all really good plays. Obviously Kyler didn't play, so that turned into Jacoby, and I didn't do 5. I just did 2. So that was a bit of a bummer. But at running back, obviously Rico was a play you had to have. I had 60% Rico, so I was above the field. He was at 37%, so well above the field on Rico, so happy with that choice. I had a ton of Josh Jacobs as well. I was about even with the field. He was right at 30%, so I was about even with the field on my ownership of him. That seemed like the most likely outcome out of that Packers game was like if a player came out of that game that you had to have, it was likely going to be Josh Jacobs. So was very heavy on that. I had a ton of Dowdle and Jacobs lineups, probably in the ballpark of somewhere around 20 of those. Kyren, where I really missed on my stacks, unfortunately, was the Rams. Kyren was my highest owned out of the Rams, so he at least didn't like completely crater our lineups. He actually was in the Milly Maker winning lineup. So I had quite a few Rico, Jacobs, and Williams stacks. But for me, with my player pool this week, like if I was going to get to the winning lineup, it would have had to be with a Dowdle and Jacobs lineup, and then 4 wide receivers a wide receiver in the flex is what I would have had to have done to get there. I'll show you some of my lineups here in a bit. At wide receiver, we were all over Pickens and Jigba. I was at 40% JSN. I was at 20% Pickens. He was at 10% ownership, so that was double the field on that. So happy with the read there. Lad, I also had at 40%. So a really big hit week at receiver, which should lead to getting paid. I mean, really, we hit at every position. We hit it except for we kind of hit it tight end, but I'll get to that. So hit at QB, hit at running back, hit at wide receiver, like hit it hard with 3 of our highest top owned guys being in the top 4. I did have a Drake May to Butte lineup. We'll look at that. So it was right there. One of my bigger misses on the week was I was heavy on Juwan Jennings. Had about 15% Juwan Jennings and only, I think, had 3 or 4 Kendrick Bourne lineups. So that would have been a really nice one to get to that would have opened up more options for me, like Pickens, JSN, McConkey, Bourne. That's a lineup that I could have, should have had 4 or 5 of those if I would have just had more Bourne instead of Jennings. I could have got to that quite a bit, and that would have been a contender for the Milly Maker with Dowdle and Jacobs, and had a huge chunk of Dowdle, Jacobs, Pickens, and JSN, and even McConkey. All those guys mixed together, where I wish I would have gotten my heaviest stack, I guess it was a game stack. I was going really heavy on Rico Dowdle and Jake Ferguson. I had that stack in probably 35 to 40% of my lineups. And if obviously I could have just added a chunk more of the Dowdle and Pickens out of that game, we would have been really sitting pretty. Ferguson really pulled me down with the structure of my lineups, prevented me from having that big week. So at tight ends, like I said, I was really heavy on Warren, Ferguson, and Kraft. What's the thing to learn from this is all 3 of those guys were in the same price range. And when I have my 3 guys that are all in the same price range, that prevents me from unlocking different builds. So I kind of like early in the week decided that I was going to get locked in on the Browns just because their matchup stats were incredible against the Steelers and they were 2,500. And I still think like if we could replay the slate again, I would still have at least 50% Browns, even knowing the outcome. Because I think if we play that game 100 times, they're probably in this 5 or better range, I don't know, 75% of the time. In my mind, just with the big matchup advantage that they had in that game. We could have seen that Rodgers gets rid of the ball very quickly, which could lead to a decent amount of, or not getting sacked, and kind of, they score a couple times, but don't really score any fantasy points because you're not getting any sacks or turnovers. Like, I guess we could have seen that, but still, just the advantage of that pass rush versus that offensive line, I really felt like there was opportunity for turnovers there. It just didn't come to fruition. But where we liked teams, like I wanted to get to the Rams, I wanted to get to the Steelers. I would have mixed in the Raiders as well, but I just couldn't get to these price points with my builds. And the biggest reason for that was because I didn't mix in a Michael Mayer, right? Like, or even Gadsden is somebody that I should have got to as well, because I was all over the Chargers passing game, especially when QJ went out. That was the pivot that I didn't make that I should have. I was just like excited, like, oh yeah, it's definitely Allen and McConkey and probably both of them. So I was heavy on Allen, and that was a big miss. He was down here somewhere in the sixes. 6-7. So that hurt us. But if I would have mixed in, I mean, I should have mixed in at least 5 to 6 Gadsden lineups. If I have 80% of my lineups have a Chargers pass catcher in it and Allen or McConkey, like I should have mixed in some Gadsden. I did mix in a couple Hassan lineups, or Hassan, sorry, lineups. I did not get to Vidal, and I still don't like. I think he was less than 2% owned. Yeah, barely 1% owned, 1.05% owned. So like that one, I like. Yes, it's against Miami, but it was like we didn't know what was going to happen in that backfield. Like there's no way that we could have got to this. I mean, I guess there's some way. Like we believed in the Chargers having a successful week, but in a split backfield, it's just hard to see one of those guys getting to 25. Like a guy getting to like 16 or 17, like that was plausible. Like a guy getting, 60 yards and a TD made sense. But Vidal, we didn't think he was going to be getting the workload that he got to get to this number. So this was surprising, but I'm okay with missing that. We were correct on fading Taylor and McCaffrey. This was exactly what I talked out throughout the week. They're likely to be in the top 5 or right around it, but as long as they don't have an outlier week where they're putting up like a 35 or a 40 spot, then they are bad chalk, and we were right on that. 24 and 26 doesn't look like a bad week, but at their price, it basically was impossible to build a winning lineup with these guys in it. That's why we were in this range. Like, I'm not getting to HN. Like, he put up a 34 spot. He was one that we could have got a little closer to because he was lower, and I built 2 lineups with him, but those were Tua lineups. But it just made sense to get to Dowdle and Jacobs, and so we were right enough, even though Jacobs wasn't running back 2, like he was a better choice over HN. I'd rather give up those 2 points to get the 500 in salary that opened up. So when we're looking at the build, by not getting to Mayer and having all my guys in the same price range, I didn't build any lineups that had variety at defense. So that locked me up and prevented me from getting that real winning lineup. Let's look at some options, or let's go look ahead at the Milly Maker lineup that won here. So Drake made a booty. That was the sneaky skinny stack. And obviously, like, this seems like crazy. Why would you get to booty? He hadn't really done anything. But when we look at our breakdown, like if I'm building 15 Drake May lineups, my most common Drake May stack was with Stephon Diggs. Obviously, that didn't play out this week. Stephon Diggs only scored 5.8 points. I also built May with Henry lineups. But if you think through it, if it's going to be May plus 1 pass catcher, if May's going to be QB1 and he's only going to bring one guy along with him, and he's a guy that most weeks, like, he's only going to bring one guy along with him because he creates a lot of plays with his legs, and they kind of spread the ball out. So generally it's only going to be one guy that comes out of that, like basically the guy that gets the touchdown or the one big play. And Booty is definitely one of those guys that can do that. Like the better, like a double stack we could have got to with May was Booty and Demario Douglas. I didn't do any Demario Douglas, but he at 3,300 put up a 16 spot. So the best punt plays of the week were Demario Douglas, Cameron Johnson, who nobody knew who that was before the week. I had a little bit of Tez Johnson that was in that same ballpark, but didn't get to Cameron Johnson, but nobody got to Cameron Johnson, so that's fine. And Kayshon Boutte. So getting to booty, like any of these builds I'm talking about after the fact, like I'm not getting to booty if I'm not doing a Drake May stack. That's just not how I go about building lineups. That just brings too much chaos if you're trying to throw in like a pump play that it doesn't really make sense outside of like Drake May stacks. It's just booty having a game where he has like this 26 points and Drake May is not a top 5 quarterback. Like that outcome is just like very unlikely. So when I go after these pump plays, I like to tie it to the quarterback. So that's how I got to my May booty lineup, was just like thinking through who are the guys most likely to be his top scoring pass catcher if he's a top 5 QB. Obviously, Diggs and Henry are the top 2. But to me, the third one was booty. So I wanted to build a booty lineup. I only built one. I wish I would have built a couple, obviously. But that's how I got to that. So in my process, if I get to booty, I get to May. And then I could have got to these 4 wide receivers pretty easily in that. Let's go and look at what my lineup actually was. But let's finish with this. So JSN, Chalk, Jacobs, Kyron Williams, Rico Dowdle, like those were 3 of our 4 core plays at running back. So the only one we missed on our core plays was Javonte Williams. But we had this combination of running backs quite a few times, and it's in the Milly Maker lineup. So we were right there. JSN was our second highest rostered receiver at 40%, just behind McConkey. George Pickens, we had 20% of. Wish we would have got more. I wish I would have got to more Dowdle and Pickens in that game stack. Dowdle, Ferguson seemed like the most likely if the quarterbacks weren't the ones like you had to have and it wasn't just a game onslaught. Dowdle and Ferguson's were the guys I was picking out the most, and then Javonte was my next, and then Pickens. So I'm bummed I didn't get more Dowdle Pickens. I got a few. I'll show you some of those, but didn't get there as much as I would have liked. But this is where I really messed up. I just didn't get to Michael Mayer. This allowed, if I get to Michael Mayer, I legitimately probably have this lineup, and I could have gone with the Raiders here and taken this down. Like all of this was in my player pool except for Mayer. That was my big miss, was not having any variety in my tight end build. Like it's not even that I was wrong at tight end, because I had Tyler Warren was one of my top 3 guys. But at 4,900 compared to 3,100, it just changes the dynamic of what you can get to. So let's look at some lineups that we could have built with like our process that would have got there. Like this one right here kills the Milly Maker. At least 500 on the table, 250. This is our May to booty stack. Dowdle and Jacobs, and then Pickens, JSN, McConkey, who are all core plays for us. This was just our miss. If I would have mixed in, a Michael Mayer lineup in every single with all my key quarterbacks, like this build would have happened. That was my miss on the week. So very close. Like obviously I had one finish in the top 1,000 in the Milly Maker, so I wasn't like that close, but like of my player pool was much closer this week to actually taking it down. I just missed right here because of my construction that wouldn't have allowed me to like getting this stack. This Dowdle, Jacobs, Pickens, JSN, and McConkey, all core plays. But to get to those guys, you need 2 pump plays in order to build that. And Booty is my nicely stacked one with May here that I could have got to that, and I'll show you the one that I did have. But Mayer was the other obvious stack. And the other thing to think about too is tight end is the best place to stack, because most of the time the winning scores at tight end, get back over here. The winning scores at tight end are not that big, right? Like 21. Like to be a real solid, like a wide receiver that you need to have, you really need a 25 plus point week to be like a guy you had to have. At tight end, if you get a 15 spot, you're almost always top 5. And almost every week, there's guys in this price range, 3,100, 3,400, 2,900, because it's so touchdown dependent, that get there. And lots of times it's connected to a quarterback, but the Raiders had a good matchup, so you'd expect them to score. Tight ends tend to score touchdowns in the red zone. This is one that I should have got to, and I just didn't. I went too high on all my tight ends, so this did not unlock a build for me. So I'm disappointed in that, but something to learn in moving forward for future weeks. I still don't hate going the Browns 100%. The matchup was just really good, But if I would have got here, I would have deviated from that 100% on Browns, because that would have opened up some options for me to get to the Rams and to the Steelers that I really wanted to get to, but I just couldn't find a way to build lineups with that salary. But this would have unlocked all of that. So let's look at some of our top lineups here. My highest scoring one was indeed the May to Booty lineup, and we were close. Like, we have a good chunk of it. We got Dowdle, JSN, Jacobs, but unfortunately, if I would have gone Dowdle and Pickens instead of Ferguson, and then I could have gone Mayer here, like, even that would have been close to unlocking it with just this lineup. So that hurts. That's a bummer that I went so hard on this Dowdle Ferguson stack. Dowdle Pickens, should have mixed that more in. Curious to hear your guys' thoughts in the comments on what do you think is like more optimal. Been thinking through this a lot. Is it more optimal to like lean into the stack that you think is the most likely to happen? Like, I really thought Dowdle Ferguson were likely to be the top two guys out of that game, so I really went heavy on it. Or should I have like just spread stacks out more across that game more evenly instead of taking like a stance? Obviously, if the Dowdle Ferguson one hits, I look like a genius. But if it doesn't hit, it really kills my like options to hit that Milly Maker, just because I think I was around 50% Ferguson when it was all said and done. So that really prevented all those lineups. All those Ferguson lineups basically had no shot at winning because of the structure. I had to build out the rest. It just took away so much salary. Something to think about. I'm into leaning into what I think is most likely, making that like my core lane that I'm building in, like Dowdle, JSN, Jacobs. Like, you're going to see that in like pretty much all of these lineups. Didn't quite make it in this one, but you'll see. Yeah, Jacobs, Dowdle. Didn't get to JSN in there either. Funny. Dowdle. This one's Dowdle and Pickens, so that was that real nice one. Dowdle Pickens again. Dowdle JSN. Like I said, I didn't get the Dowdle Jacobs JSN as much as I thought I did. It is kind of a hard one, because really, again, that all comes down to this tight end spot. If I would have got to more Mayer, that would have opened it up, or even Gadsden is another guy that I could have got to, then that would have made it a lot easier to get to the combo of all three. Booty opened that up here to allow me to get to Jacobs, Dowdle, and JSN. So, yeah, that was the biggest takeaway. Trevor Lawrence, nice lineup here. Single stack, BTJ. And we got Jacobs, Dowdle, and McConkey here with BTJ. And we didn't really miss on McMillan. Wasn't at the top, but was solid enough, like, give us a chance. 190 on this one. Here's that Jacoby lineup. So this is a bummer. Like, you put in, yeah, we could have put in Bourne here instead of Harrison. Yeah, it's a bummer. Or we even could have double stacked it, tight end, put in Warren into this spot here. Would have opened up a lot. That receiver there, we could have got to JSN. So different options on this one. I'm upset with myself that I didn't build at least one Brissett to McBride lineup. It just made sense, but I failed there, unfortunately. So Daniel Jones, it was tough to build a winning lineup with him. I actually didn't find a way to do it. I was building back. Let's look at some of the ways we could have built it out. So I started to show you this, but there's a Drake May, a Booty lineup with all those core guys that we had. And then Mayer and the Rams, that would have scored 250, 249. The winning score was 187. Or sorry, that was not the winning score. It was 227 was the winning score. So this one would have destroyed the Milly Maker lineup with all of our core guys beyond Booty and Mayer. That's just where we didn't get to. Here's a Jacoby Brissett one that would have taken it down. Same core group of guys, all core player pool guys, high ownership, but irrelevant. Again, like ownership doesn't matter. This is what matter, the score. So this one I had to get a little creative by throwing Downs in there, which is the guy that I had as one of my punts. So like I could have got there. That one would have been 230. But another thing that I could have done with the Brissett lineup is just play Brissett when they're this cheap. If they score anything around 20, that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to bring somebody along. Like obviously he did bring McBride along, but I actually could have, if we do like a 2-for-1 swap here. So McBride and Downs is 9,800 and they scored a total of 37 points. Meyer and Thomas was a total of 9,300, so 500 cheaper. And they scored a total of 39 points. So 2 more points than the McBride combo did. And if I wanted to go Mayer, I could also bring in Tetaroa, which was a very common one for me. So I could go on Mayer, Tetaroa, and then I actually could have got to the Rams defense there as well. So that would have been a swap for 12,200 in salary for 42. And if I would have gone Mayer, McMillan, and the Rams, that would have been 12,600. Was that? That would have been but that still would have actually been under salary. So it could have done that. And then that would have been a total of 50 points. So it scored 10 more. And that's one that I could have got to. So the key, again, was Mayer. Like if I could have got to Mayer, that would have unlocked a lot of what I needed to win the Millie this week. Could have also built a Millie lineup with Sam Darnold. This is like what I like to show you too, is like you don't have to be perfect. Like a Darnold to JSN to Cooper Kupp stack. Kupp obviously didn't have a huge game, but it would make sense to build a double stack with Darnold with those being the two pieces. I didn't build any of these. I went to Horton a couple times, but just to prove a concept like this, you could have got to. Then we get to our core guys of Dowdle, Jacobs, Pickens, and McConkey. Then again, if we would have got Mayer in there, that would have allowed us to get to the Rams D. Would score 227.9 and taken it down. So Michael Mayer was the key. I had all these guys. This was a lineup that I would have built if I would have just put Michael Mayer into more lineups. If I would have got to 10, 15% Michael Mayer, I would have had one of these like massive lineups. I know that's a big coulda, shoulda, woulda, but when we're going through these recaps each week, the point is to learn what we can do in the next week to take down the Millie. I'm not just like saying I'm trying to win the Millie. I am genuinely trying to win the Millie. So each week is a learning opportunity to decide what can we do different next week? What can we learn? What mistakes did we make that we can adjust in future weeks? So for me, one of the biggest takeaways is I want to have different roster constructions, different value points at each position. Where I got in trouble at tight end was all my core plays were all basically the same price. So that changed the complexion of lineups that I could build. There were certain builds that I couldn't get to because I was locked in at this tight end spot. Michael Mayer, what made sense to be a punt play, and I should have mixed him in across my lineups. If I would have done so, I would have got to these builds. Like these are guys that were huge core plays for me, every single one of these guys. And then I would have got to Kupp if I was building more Darnold lineups. Like that's something I could have done pretty easily. So yeah, pretty disappointed that it's just that one mistake, but that prevented us from having a huge week. Let's look at, I like to be transparent with you on where my wins and losses are. This is our fourth straight losing week after our big win in week 2, where we had a profit of 15,500. It's been pretty tough since, but we had a little bit of at least a bounce back as far as losing less this past week. So I did a little bit of cash and multipliers this week, and it was very successful for me. I just did one $250 cash lineup and took it down. It was actually one of my better scoring lineups. Is 173 is what it scored. And then took down a few triple ups and one quintuple up, $100 quintuple up. So those were profitable for the week on all those. Disappointed in my small field outcome with as many winning lineups as I had in the Milly Maker and some strong ones. I should have had a much better week in small field, but I just chose incorrectly. on my lineups that I put into the Milly Maker. Tragically, my lineup that I put into the Wildcat, I realized that all my small field stuff, I had Rico Dowdle in every single lineup. So I decided maybe I should have one that doesn't have Dowdle in it. So my biggest entry, $333 one, I didn't put Dowdle in it. It was a Sam Darnold lineup with JSN. So it got off to a hot start, but without Dowdle, it did not get the job done. So sad that I pivoted there. That would have been a nice one to bank on. So disappointed, like with when you hit 55 lineups in the money, like that's a really solid week. Yeah, even though it's a loss, like this is when we're playing these large field GPPs, it all comes down to banking like big wins, like taking down a smaller tournament or finishing top 5 in a bigger tournament. Those are how we pay for the season. And we just didn't hit that this week because of our miss on Michael Mayer and our miss at defense. But still, with the amount of lineups that we cashed, I would have expected to have a bigger week in small GPP. I just put the wrong lineups in those, unfortunately. So that was the biggest mistakes of the past week. We were all over it, though. The spreadsheet led us to a lot of where we needed to be. I think our process is getting better week in and week out. Feel really confident about going into week 7. Appreciate y'all tuning in this week again, where I'll have my game-by-game breakdown where I take you through my weekly spreadsheets, show you all the matchup advantages that led us to Carolina's run game having a huge day. It showed a huge passing game advantage for Dallas, which led us to George Pickens. Saw a solid advantage for the Colts, which led us to Warren. Like there wasn't a lot that came out of that, unfortunately. Same with the Rams. Like Kyron didn't kill us, but the advantage didn't lead to anything huge for us there. But Seahawks, that led us to Darnold and JSN. Chargers, that got us to McConkey. Like all of our core plays that went off showed matchup advantages, and we got out of our weekly breakdown. So once the grades are completed tonight, I will build the spreadsheet for week 7, and we will go game by game and look for opportunities, start looking at pricing early on in the week and start building out those $1 million lineups. And then later in the week, I will have my player pool video where I break down who I am playing at each position, as well as just like a general frequency on how much I'm going to try to get to an ownership percentage on them. So that'll help you build or start the week towards building this $1 million lineup. Next week, this is going to be us. Milly Maker Maniac taking down the Milly Maker. Next week, this will be our winning lineup in there. All right, my friends, I appreciate you tuning in. Please comment, like, subscribe, tell your friends about the channel, trying to get it to grow. Really appreciate you guys. Have a great day, and we will see you later in the week for week 7 game-by-game breakdown. Thank you, my friends. Have a great day.